Hi AGP students, Morgan Pesic here, your reading and writing guru. Today we're talking about the critical reading portion of the SAT, and more specifically we're focusing on paired passages. By the end of today's video, I hope that you can say, I can understand the different types of paired passages that are on the SAT, and how to use AGP strategies to be successful with paired passage questions. So first I want to talk about the most common types of paired passages. These are in order from most common to least common. So first is a passage 1 versus passage 2, meaning that they have opposing viewpoints. They disagree with each other on a certain topic. Then we have passage 1 and passage 2 agree, but they have different focuses or stylistic differences. So for example, passage 1 is written in the third person and passage 2 is written in the first person, but they agree on the same topic. Then we have passage 1 and passage 2 discuss completely different aspects of the same event. So for example, passage 1 focuses on how a certain event was perceived by the press, and passage 2 focuses on how it impacted women. Same topic, but different angles of the same thing. And lastly, passage 2 provides an example of an idea that passage 1 describes. Okay, so when we're reading paired passages, we're doing them to understand the following things. We're going to ask ourselves, which type of passage 1 versus passage 2 are we working with of those last four that I just described on the previous slide? How are the passages similar and how are they different? Which main ideas are supported by one another and which ones differ? What is the tone of each article? And is the author of each article in favor for or against something? So we're looking for them to share the same position on something if possible. Okay, this is what I call the strategy plan for tackling paired passages. This is what you need to do when you get to the paired passage portion of the SAT. You're going to first read the introduction and the first passage. Then you're going to answer questions that deal with the first passage only. So before you even read the second passage, you're going to skim through the questions to see if there are any that deal with just the first passage and answer those. Then you'll read the second passage. Then you'll answer the questions that deal with just the second passage, so you're keeping each passage fresh in your mind while tackling the questions that have to do with only that particular passage. Then you'll go through and answer questions that pertain to both of them together. It's important to know that the questions that ask you about both passages at the same time are considered to be the most difficult questions on the critical reading portion of the test. Okay, let's look at an example. This is an example of a short paired passage, and on the SAT you're going to have one short paired passage and one long paired passage somewhere within the three critical reading sections of the test. Okay, so we're going to go with a short paired passage for this video, and this is the first passage of the pair. Just how overcrowded is Earth anyway? Certainly the world is filled with empty places. A flight almost anywhere reveals vast expanses of unoccupied land. Cities cover only a small percentage of Earth. Indeed, when we look at the world's population relative to the land available, we find out just how underpopulated the world is. A noted economist recently put Earth's population in perspective by asking what would happen if the world's 6 billion people were put into the land area of Texas. His answer? Each person would have an area equal to the floor space of a typical U.S. home. And he further notes that some cities in the United States contain enough land area to provide standing room for the entire global population. Okay, now usually at this point we would go and skim through the questions to find the questions that just pertained with passage 1. But there are only 4 questions about this pair passage, and none of them are specifically about passage 1. So we're going to move on and look at passage 2. The idea that the number of people per square mile is a key determinant of population pressure is as widespread as it is wrong. The key issue in judging overpopulation is not how many people can fit into any given space, but whether Earth can supply the population's long-term requirement for food, water, and other resources. Most of the empty land in the United States, for example, either grows the food essential to our well-being or supplies us with raw materials. Densely populated countries and cities can be crowded only because the rest of the world is not. Okay, remember those things that you're supposed to think about when you're reading paired passages? Let's think about them right now. Which type of passage 1 versus passage 2 are we working with here? The first type. This is an opposing viewpoints passage. How are the passages similar and different? They're similar in their topic. They're both dealing with the idea of overpopulation, and their tones are both very didactic or informative in their tone. How are they different? With their ideas or what they think. Passage 1 is arguing that we're certainly underpopulated because there's a lot of land available, whereas passage 2 is saying, no, not necessarily are we underpopulated because we need to look at how much resources are required to contain or to maintain our population. Okay, which main ideas are supported by one another and which ones differ? The ideas that are supported are that cities are overcrowded and that there is plenty of excess land or unpopulated land. They differ. Passage 1 says that overpopulation has to do with land available, whereas passage 2, like I said, overpopulation has to do with the supply of resources. What is the tone of each article? Like I said, both have an informative tone, although passage 2 might be a little bit more critical than passage 1. Is the author of each article in favor, for, or against something and try to find a connection? Passage 1 argues or makes a case for how much space each person really has and that the land area of the earth is more than enough for the number of people living on it. Whereas passage 2 criticizes that supposition and argues that we have to consider if Earth can supply the resources that our population needs. Okay, so let's look at our first question that deals with this paired passage. The author of passage 2 would most likely criticize the author of passage 1 for. So this is an extended reasoning question because we're obviously not going to find the answer to this directly stated in either passage. We have to kind of synthesize both passages and think about them together. Okay, so the first answer choice that we have is using incorrect data to support a flawed conclusion. While passage 2 does not agree with the conclusion that passage 1 states that land area is the most key determinant in figuring out whether we're over or underpopulated, so we'll keep A around for now. B says, severely overstating the extent of a global problem. I don't think this could be right because passage 2 might even say that the author of passage 1 is not overstating the global problem, that there might be understating because they're saying that the world is underpopulated. So B would not be a good answer for us. C says, recommending a course of action that might have damaging effects. Well, passage 1 doesn't include any recommendations for a course of action because they don't see overpopulation as a problem. So that would not be correct. D says, focusing on the wrong factor in considering an issue. Yes, passage 1 focuses on land available, whereas passage 2 suggests that we have to think about the resources, so we'll keep D around for now. And E, allowing personal prejudice to interfere with scientific inquiry. Well, all of passage 1's data is based off the work of a noted economist, so there's really not any issue of personal prejudice in this passage, so E would not be the correct answer. So we're left with A and D to consider. Remember that A says using incorrect data to support a flawed conclusion, and we did point out that passage 2 might criticize them for a flawed conclusion, but not for using incorrect data to support that flawed conclusion. This word data here is what makes A not the best answer. And then if we go back to D, focusing on the wrong factor and considering an issue, Yes, this is our best answer because the factor in passage 1 is land available, and passage 2 criticizes that even from the beginning and says we don't have to think about land available, we have to think about resources. So D is our best answer. Question number 2. The tone of the first sentence of passage 2 is best characterized as. Let's go back and look at that first sentence. The idea that the number of people per square mile is a key determinant of population pressure is as widespread as it is wrong. So how would we describe the first sentence tone? It's very strong, declarative, confident, right? Let's go back and look at our answer choices. We have A, wistful, which means sad or melancholy. No, that's not really the tone of the first sentence. B, dismayed, means to lose courage or resolution. We said it was very strong and confident, so B would not be a good answer. C, emphatic, uttered with or marked with emphasis. Yes, they are emphasizing something, so we'll keep C around for now. D, ambivalent, to be uncertain as to which approach to follow. No, they're not uncertain. They're pretty sure about what they think, so D would not be correct. E, apologetic, to regretfully acknowledge fault or failure. No, they're not apologizing for anything. So that leaves us with C as our best answer. And we still wanted to consider D and E in case there was a better answer. Remember, one of our strategies for any type of critical reading question is to consider all answer choices before making your final answer. So in this case, D and E were both duds, so C is our best answer. The author uses that first sentence to emphasize or stress the importance of the fact that a certain idea is wrong. It forcefully states that the idea of land availability is wrong. Okay, our next question. It can be inferred from the use of quotation marks in line 19 that the author of passage 2 would most likely. Let's look at that in the passage. Most of the empty land in the United States, for example, either grows the food essential to our well-being or supplies us with raw materials. So what is the author doing by using the quotation marks around empty? Well, he or she is insinuating that it's not really empty because he goes on or she goes on to say that it's doing something. It's not just empty, it's growing our food or growing stuff that supplies us with materials. So let's go back and look at our answer choices. A says, criticize passage 1 for overstating the nature of a problem. No, again, passage 2 would probably say that passage 1 is understating the problem, not overstating it, because they're saying that overpopulation is not a problem. So A is not a good choice. B, take issue with passage 1 for failing to acknowledge a change in population patterns. There is no discussion in either passage of a change in population patterns, so B is not a good answer. C, disagree with the characterization in passage 1 of certain regions. This sounds good, because passage 1 claims that the world is filled with empty places, and passage 2 says that they're not really empty, they are filled with resources, so we'll keep that around for now. Let's consider D and E to make sure there's not a better answer. D says, endorse the solution to a problem advanced in passage 1. Well, passage 1 is not advancing a problem. We keep talking about this. They actually think that overpopulation is not a problem. So, and also passage 2 offers no solution to a problem, so D is not a good answer. E says, concur with a scientific theory briefly mentioned in passage 1. Well, passage 2 does not agree with anything from passage 1, so we would eliminate E. Concur means to agree, and that is not at all what passage 2 is doing. So that leaves us with C as our best answer. And that's true. They are using the quotation marks to express his or her disagreement with the characterization of land found in passage 1. Okay, and let's look at one more last question for our example paired passage. Both authors acknowledge which of the following points? A, Earth contains a great deal of unoccupied land. Yes, they do acknowledge that there is unoccupied land, they just have a different way in which they see it. Passage 1 sees it as, well, we're underpopulated because there's all this unoccupied land. And passage 2 sees it as, It is unoccupied, but it's not empty. It's providing us with resources. But they do agree that it has a great deal of unoccupied land, so we're going to keep A around for now. B says, estimates of Earth's population are not reliable. Well, based on just passage 2, passage 2 never talks about the Earth's population as far as numbers. So if we were doing the strategy of eliminating answer choices, even if it's wrong for one passage, we would be eliminating B. If you think about passage 1, we don't really have any way of knowing if the estimate that they give us are unreliable. So for both it's wrong, but you could eliminate B right away from the basis of passage 2 not mentioning that at all. C says technology is transforming empty spaces into productive land. Okay, again, if we were just to consider one passage or the other, this would not make sense for passage 1, because passage 1 does not discuss empty spaces in terms of their productivity. Passage 2 does. It talks about it being places for producing the things that we need, but it doesn't talk about technology at all. So really, both of them eliminate this answer. D, non-scientists do not appreciate the dangers of overpopulation. Neither author specifies or mentions scientists versus non-scientists and how they view the dangers of overpopulation. So D is not a good answer either. And E, Earth's population is outstripping available resources. This is not addressed in passage 1, so again, it's automatically wrong. And it is maybe insinuated in passage 2, but it's not said quite like that. It does talk about how we have to consider resources when we think about whether we're overpopulated or not, but it never says that we're outstripping available resources with the population that we have right now. So either way, E is not a good answer. And we did what one of our strategies tells us to do, consider all answer choices, but we still come back to A being the best answer. Earth contains a great deal of unoccupied land. Again, they both do agree on that there is unoccupied land. They just have a different way in which they see how that unoccupied land could be used or should be used. And that brings us to the end of our video, so hopefully at this point you are saying, I can understand the different types of paired passages that are on the SAT and how to use AGP strategies to be successful with paired passage questions. So we did a short paired passage model today. With long paired, you also have to add annotating, which we've already gone over. And it's definitely more important with long paired passages to follow that strategy plan, where we read one passage and then look for questions that are just about the first passage, then read the second passage, look for questions that are just about the second passage, and then after all of that, answer the questions that have to do with both simultaneously, because with those long passages, you're going to want to keep one passage fresh in your mind at a time until you have to think about them both at the same time. Okay, we will be getting more practice with paired passages in class. I will see you then.